She entered the courtroom smiling, confident she was going to be out soon, she thought. 32-year-old Tiffanie Lucas believes she'll walk out on bond. Her lawyers paint a convincing picture, a mentally broken woman who lost control. Opioid withdrawal triggered a psychotic episode, they claimed.
Essentially, Tiffany's psychotic episode was brought on by opioid withdrawal. She abstained from use, and in trying to get clean, this was the side effect.
The judge listens, seems convinced, but what happens next will shatter that carefully built defense. The prosecution calls its witness, Jayden's grandmother, Regina Rowan. She took the stand not as an ally and looked Tiffanie dead in the eyes and said the words that cut through the entire courtroom.
You know we love Jayden and Maurice. You know Jayden was the only thing we had left. And you took him from us. And I hope they give you 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. I want you to suffer just like I'm suffering right now.
But here is what most people watching this case from the outside never fully understood. Tiffanie Lucas did not snap out of nowhere. The warning signs were there. The cries for help were there. And the system that was supposed to protect those 2 little boys, Maurice Baker Jr. and Jayden Howard, had been told more than once. Every single detail you are about to hear has been verified through court records, police reports, surveillance footage, and trial testimony. This is the story of how a mother went from screaming for help on her neighbor's doorstep to pulling a trigger in her own bedroom. And the chilling truth is, the people closest to this tragedy saw it coming. On the night of November 8, 2023, 4 gunshots were captured on a nearby Ring doorbell camera. 4.5 minutes later, Tiffanie Lucas stumbled out of her front door, yelling for help, and then collapsed in her neighbor's yard. Inside that house, her sons were lying in their bedroom, covered in blood.
My neighbor just came up to my door and just passed out, and I can't get her to wake up. She just started screaming that her kids are dying.
This is the case of Tiffanie Lucas, a mother who lost everything and took her children with her. To understand what happened inside that house on Bentwood Drive, you first need to understand what was happening in the hours before it. Because Tiffanie Lucas was not a woman who was hiding her pain. She was screaming it. And the people around her heard every word. The day before the murders, November 7, 2023, Lucas showed up at her neighbor's door. A Ring doorbell camera captured the entire thing. She was frantic, shaking, barely holding it together. And when her neighbor opened the door, the words that came out of her mouth were the kind that stay with you. I need you. God is talking to me. I need help. She said it again, louder this time, as if trying to make someone, anyone, understand what she was going through. I need to have good people around me. I need family. I need help. That was less than 24 hours before she shot her sons. That same day, Lucas and the boys were seen together at a local Waffle House. Surveillance footage from the restaurant captured one of the last moments the 3 of them spent together. A server who was working that shift later told investigators something that stood out. She looked like she was in her own world, like she couldn't comprehend what was going on. Maurice was 6. Jayden was 9. They sat in that booth not knowing that the next day would be the last day of their lives. Then came November 8, 2023. At some point that evening, 4 gunshots rang out inside the home on Bentwood Drive in Shepherdsville, Kentucky. A Ring doorbell camera on a neighboring property captured the sound. 4 shots, rapid, one after the other. Then, silence. For 4.5 minutes, nothing. No one came out, no one called for help. The house just sat there, quiet, on a street where neighbors expected nothing more than an ordinary Wednesday night. Then, the front door opened. Tiffanie stumbled out. She was yelling, screaming for help. She made it as far as her neighbor's yard before her legs gave out and she collapsed. Officers arrived and found her on the ground, barely coherent. Inside the house, they found the boys. Maurice and Jayden were in their bedroom. Both had been shot in the head. Both boys were rushed to the hospital. Neither survived. Lucas was arrested on the scene, and in the first moments after her arrest, she told police something that would become important later. She said someone had given her a firearm and that she had left it in the bedroom. She suggested the shooting may have been an accident, but she also admitted that no one else had been inside the home. No one else, just Tiffanie and her 2 sons. Here is what makes this case so difficult to sit with. Tiffanie Lucas was not someone the world forgot about. The people around her, her family, her neighbors, the people who were supposed to protect her children, they knew. They knew something was wrong, and some of them tried to do something about it. Maurice Baker, the father of 6-year-old Maurice Jr., had been fighting for custody of his son for a long time. He begged Tiffanie. On multiple occasions, he asked her to let him take the boy. She refused every time. During his victim impact statement at sentencing, Baker told the court exactly how desperate things had become.
Ever since my son was born, I begged Tiffanie for my son on so many different occasions because of drug use, the prostitution that she did, and the other way she had.
He accused Lucas of drug use and prostitution. He said he had watched his son grow up in a situation he knew was dangerous, and he was never able to get him out. Bobby Baker, Maurice Jr.'s aunt, was another person who saw what was happening up close. She later revealed something that shook the entire courtroom. Before the murders, she had reported Tiffanie to Kentucky's Child Protective Services. She had raised the alarm. She had done what she believed would keep those boys safe. It was not enough. The family called Lucas selfish. They said they had offered to help with the boys. They said they had a place for them to go. They said they would have taken them in at any time. Regina Rowan, Jayden's grandmother, made this painfully clear when she addressed Tiffanie directly in that courtroom. "You know we love Jayden and Maurice. You know that you could have gave them kids to us and we would have taken care of them, but you have been selfish." The picture that emerges is one of a woman who was struggling, who was battling addiction, who was losing her grip on reality, and a family that was desperately trying to pull those boys out of the wreckage. But Tiffanie Lucas held on, and in the end, the only people who paid the price for that were her children. For months after her arrest, Tiffanie Lucas maintained a not guilty plea. Her trial was scheduled for December 2024. The court was preparing. The families were bracing themselves for what would be a brutal and drawn-out process. Then, on October 23, 2024, just weeks before the trial was set to begin, Lucas changed everything. She pleaded guilty. 2 counts of murder. No deal on the table, no negotiation. She stood before the court and admitted to shooting and killing her own sons. There would be no trial. No witnesses cross-examined on the stand for days, no jury deliberating. Lucas made the decision herself. The judge would decide her sentence. Bobby Baker, Maurice Jr.'s aunt, had sat through every court appearance. She had been prepared to sit through the entire trial. "I would have sat through a trial and heard all of it. I would have." But without a trial, a lot of the details that the family wanted the public to hear never came out in open testimony. That is why Baker made it a point to share her own experience, including her reports to Child Protective Services before the murders ever happened. The Commonwealth's attorney, Bailey Taylor, stood on the courthouse steps after the guilty plea and told reporters exactly where he stood. "I'm going to recommend a very high sentence." Each murder charge carried a potential sentence of 20 to 50 years with the possibility of life in prison. Taylor made it clear he was going to push for the maximum. But the guilty plea did not mean Tiffanie Lucas's defense attorneys had nothing to say. At the sentencing hearing, they stood before Judge Rodney Burris and made their case, not to deny what Tiffanie Lucas did. They did not stand up in that courtroom and claim she was innocent. They argued something different, something that made this case more complicated than most people realized. They argued that on the night of November 8th, Tiffanie Lucas was not the person she had been for most of her life. They argued she was in the grip of a psychotic episode and that the episode was brought on by opioid withdrawal. Her attorney, Richard Lonachok, explained this to the court at sentencing. Essentially, Tiffany's psychotic episode was brought on by opioid withdrawal. She abstained from use, and in trying to get clean, this was the side effect. This is not an excuse. No defense attorney in that courtroom tried to frame it as one, but it is a piece of the puzzle that changes how you understand what happened inside that house. Lonachuk told the court that in the days leading up to the murders, Lucas was experiencing powerful delusions. She truly believed, that she and her children were being stalked by an unknown group of powerful people. She was convinced that these people were going to abduct her sons and torture them. That is the state of mind her attorneys say she was in when she picked up that gun. And there is evidence to support it. The Ring doorbell footage from the day before, the same footage that captured her begging her neighbor for help, showed a woman who was not thinking clearly, a woman who believed God was speaking to her, a woman who was terrified. The defense also revealed something else at sentencing, something that added a layer of tragedy to an already devastating case. They said that after she shot her sons, Tiffanie Lucas turned the gun on herself. She tried to end her own life. The gun jammed. It did not fire. And so she walked out of that bedroom, stumbled out the front door, and collapsed in her neighbor's yard, screaming for help. Not for her sons. They were already gone. She was screaming because she was still alive. Judge Rodney Burris heard all of this. He listened to the defense argue mental illness. He watched the surveillance footage. He read the reports. And he had already made his decision. Maurice Baker, the father, told the court he had lost not just his son that day. "It affected me in so many ways. It's kind of hard for me to explain." Regina Rowan, Jayden's grandmother, who had already lost Jayden's father and another son before this, told Lucas she would never forgive her. She told her she wanted her to suffer the same way the family was suffering. Bobby Baker said she was heartbroken. She said she considered both boys her nephews. She said she would never forgive Tiffanie Lucas. During the statements, Lucas sat in her chair, shaking, wiping her eyes with a tissue. For the first time since her arrest, she was looking directly at the family she had destroyed. Then, Judge Rodney Burris spoke. He had heard the evidence. He had read the reports. He had listened to the defense argue mental illness and opioid withdrawal. He had seen the surveillance footage, the body camera video from that night, all of it. And he had made his decision. "I cannot imagine the sheer horror these children must have experienced seeing their mother with a gun." 2 life sentences, one for Maurice Baker Jr., one for Jayden Howard, the maximum the law allowed.
The court will adjudge the defendant guilty of the offense of murder and fix her sentence at life in prison. This time, the court will order that the Sheriff's Department deliver the defendant to the custody of the Corrections Cabinet for service of her sentence of imprisonment. That's all for today. Court will be adjourned.
Commonwealth Attorney Bailey Taylor addressed the court after the sentence was handed down. Tiffanie Lucas not only murdered Jayden and Maurice, but she forever scarred the lives of their family and friends, both adults and children. Under Kentucky law, Lucas is eligible for parole after 20 years. That fact alone made the family angry. They did not believe justice had been fully served. Bobby Baker was still upset after the hearing. But Taylor addressed that too. "I can't speak for the parole board, but I think the chances of her being paroled after 20 years are somewhere between slim and none. Tiffanie Lucas will be in prison for the rest of her life. That is the reality she now lives in. But for the family of Maurice and Jayden, no sentence, not life, not 2 lifetimes, will ever give them back what was taken from them on that night in Shepherdsville." Maurice Baker Jr. was 6 years old. Jayden Howard was 9. They were described by people who knew them as funny, kind, and full of life. A family friend named Talia Crutcher called them heaven-sent. Her son said his favorite memories were playing football with the boys. They deserved better. They deserved a mother who fought for them, and the people in their lives who tried, the aunts, the grandmothers, the fathers who begged. They deserved a system that listened. This is the case of Tiffanie Lucas, a story about addiction, about mental illness, about the people who tried to sound the alarm and were not heard in time, and about 2 little boys who paid the price for every failure that came before that night.